Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today with us. This is the Benton Street Bikeway study, our phase 2 community workshop. Today, we're going to share with you our preliminary roadway design concept with you and get your feedback on what you like, what you don't like for each of the design concepts. Next slide, please. Again, thank you for being here. This meeting is being recorded. Staff will post this PowerPoint presentation and also the recording on the project webpage. As the project manager, I highly welcome you to connect with us and keep updated on the project status. You can leave us a voicemail at 408-381-4240 or send us an email at bentonstudy@altago.com. We also included a QR code here where you can access our project webpage. If you haven't seen our concept survey, you can also access it from there and take our concept survey and give us your input on there. Next slide. Here's a very quick agenda of today's meeting. We'll start with a project team introductions, then go into the project overview and tell you a little bit more about the outreach activities that have been completed to date. We then dive into the existing conditions with corridor parking and collision data analysis. And then we will share with you the alternative concept designs that we came up with for this Benton Street corridor. We then have a Q&A session. At that time, you may raise your hand to ask us any questions, and then we'll wrap it up with the next steps. Next slide, please. Again, good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole He. I am the project manager for the Benton Street Bikeway study. On the city side, we also have a lot of staff supporting this project. We have Michael Liu, our Assistant Public Works Director, Steve Chan, our new Tram Station Manager, Carol Shariat, Principal Tram Station Planner, and Ralph Garcia, our Senior Civil Engineer. So they're providing a lot of the project oversight on the technical analysis. And then for this project, we have Alta Planning and Design, helping the city developing the preliminary design concepts. Today, I have Ben Fraser with me, Associate Planner from Alta, and Katrina Ortiz, Landscape Designer from Alta. From now on, I'll pass it over to Ben to go over the project overview.
Thanks, Nicole. So just before we dive a little bit deeper into the presentation, I just want to go over a couple of quick Zoom tips and tricks for the presentation. You may have already had an opportunity to rename yourself when you joined the workshop. So if you haven't, we ask that you please do. There's a participants tab down at the bottom or the top of your screen, and there that will allow you to rename yourself, and just your first name and last initial will be great, just to make it a little easier to converse a little later on during the open Q&A session. And then additionally, you'll also see the Q&A button down there, and feel free to enter your questions and comments throughout the presentation along the way, and we'll either get back to you directly through the Q&A, or we might save it for the Q&A session at the end of the presentation and answer it then. But feel free to drop your questions or comments in there throughout the presentation. And then lastly, we will have an open question and answer session at the end of the presentation. You won't see that now, but when we turn on the raised hand function, you'll see a little raised hand, and you can click on that, and that'll raise your hand, and that'll allow us to then click on you to unmute you, and then you can then talk out loud and share your questions and thoughts. And that'll be a little later in the presentation after we go over some existing conditions and then the draft corridor concepts. All right, so now let's kind of get into it. So in terms of the plan process, the Benton study is going to go through 4 different phases. The first phase that's already complete is the information gathering and existing conditions analysis. That's when we collected a lot of data on the corridor, traffic counts, travel time data, parking study, parking utilization, all that kind of data, and we collected that to give us a good baseline of what the corridor is right now. And then in phase 2, which is where we are right now, we're developing roadway concepts, and we're sharing them with you, the community, to get your feedback on them. And then the next phase is reviewing technical analysis and the revised concepts. So what we're going to do with that data we collected in the first phase, we're going to model what the impacts of the different concepts are, and then we'll share the results of those technical analyses with you in the next phase. And then in the last phase, the plan will go to City Council for their review and consideration. So this is kind of another view of that schedule. We're kind of right in the middle right now in the second phase of community workshops. This is the fourth workshop for the Benton Street corridor, and then we'll have another 2 workshops in that third phase where we share the revised concepts and all that analysis data back with you. And that will likely happen a little later on this year in a couple of months, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so now let's dive into project overview and updates. So just as a quick review of the project area, it is Benton Street between Dunford Way to the west and Lincoln Street to the east. It's a very long corridor that predominantly has 2 different widths to it: a 64-foot wider section to the west, and then a 30-foot narrower section to the east. And this is kind of broken down here again. So between Dunford Way and Marianne, that's a 1.8-mile east-west segment that is 4 to 5 lanes. And there it has a posted speed limit of 25 to 30 miles an hour, and that's typically 64 feet. And then from Marianne Drive to Lincoln Street, this is the narrower eastern segment. It's 0.8 miles long, 2 lanes in each direction with a posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour. And kind of along the entire stretch of the corridor, the land uses are primarily residential. And so what have we done today? So in the first round of community engagement, we held 2 virtual workshops similar to the one you're attending right now. Both again, one on a weeknight and then another one on a Saturday morning. We had one pop-up event that was synced up with Bike to Work Day, where we had a little event at the San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail. We tabled near the Agnew trailhead, and we gathered feedback from riders as they passed by. And we were also there with an Energizer station there. To give riders, little snacks and things as they rode by. We also had an online community survey that had over 100 responses from various community members that asked how they use the corridor and asked about their kind of vision and goals for the future of it. And then we also had that existing conditions and data collection that involved the site visit, where we went and we walked chunks of the corridor. We saw an afternoon dismissal of the high school to see how that kind of deals with the corridor. We collected traffic counts and travel time data throughout the entire corridor. We collected parking utilization data, and then we also conducted a collision analysis. And so what were those top themes that we heard from the community engagement? The community members want safe, comfortable bicycle facilities that they will want to use and feel comfortable using. That doesn't feel scared that they're too close to cars or fast-moving vehicles or that kind of thing. Improved bicycle crossing. I know a lot of other bicycle routes in Santa Clara cross the corridor, including the San Tomas Creek Trail, and we heard that from a lot of users that that's a very uncomfortable and stressful crossing for them. And kind of tagged into that next bullet too as well. That was one of the most popular crossings we've heard about through all of our community engagement phases. And then lastly, the need to kind of balance the parking and traffic congestion concerns of residents with streetscape design. And that's something we'll get into a little bit later as we kind of talk about the concepts, but it's like, what are the community preferences and what the trade-off is to get these more comfortable bicycle facilities. So now I want to dive a little bit deeper into the corridor collision and parking analysis to give you a little bit of insights into some of that existing conditions data that we collected. So in terms of collisions on Benton Street, we studied data on collisions from 2017 to 2022. And along the entire stretch of the corridor, there were 102 collisions that involved motor vehicles. There were 16 collisions that involved people biking and 4 collisions that involved people walking. This graphic kind of shows you where the collisions were along the corridor. You see a bit of a concentration kind of along the western side of Santa Clara High, and then a little bit more kind of over here east of San Tomas as well. Then we have some context on neighboring corridors to the north and south as well, but these numbers here are only for Benton Street. A little bit more info on the collision analysis. There were no fatal collisions along the corridor, luckily, but 2 of the bicycle collisions did involve severe injuries. Of all the collisions along the corridor, 33 of them, part of the cause was noted as vehicle speeding. And just a couple of other highlights. You can see vehicle unsafe speed was the top factor, and then other right-of-way violations you see as the second top factor. And then this kind of graph on the left, you kind of see how often collisions occurred at various times throughout the day. So you see kind of that higher peak in the afternoon, kind of on that both that PM like rush hour peak, but also a little bit earlier in the afternoon, sometimes around that school arrival time. And then you also see another spike in the morning around the AM peak as well. And then in terms of the parking data we collected parking data. We collected parking data the last week of April, earlier this year, and we collected data on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. We counted the number of cars parked on Benton Street and within 500 feet of every cross street during peak periods. That was 7 to 9 a.m., 11 to 2, 11 to 2, and then 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And we counted every half hour during those times. And this is what those results kind of average out to. So on the north side of Benton, there are 313 parking spaces available. And on average, only 94 of them are used, which works out to a 30% utilization rate. On the south side of the street, there are 273 parking spaces available, and on average, 62 of them are used for a 23% utilization rate. And then if we average that overall across the corridor, a total of 586 spaces with 156 of them on average used for a 27% on average utilization rate. And as I mentioned, we also looked at the side streets, and across all of the side streets along the corridor, there's over 1,200 spaces, 1,216, and on average, we saw 372 of those used for a 29% utilization rate. And we have here kind of a map visualization of what that kind of looks like. As you can kind of see along the corridor, along Benton itself is mostly under 50% utilized, which is that green color you see. There are a couple of tighter pockets, especially along the western side here near Lawrence. And then there are a couple of side streets that are very heavily utilized for parking, like Wood Duck. And then we also have looks like White Drive over here as well. So a couple of side streets are tightly used. But generally speaking, most of them are fairly underutilized with under 50% use. So now it's time to dive into the corridor concepts and what the potential alternatives are to try to get better, safer, more comfortable bicycle facilities on Benton Street. So just a quick reminder of the corridor concepts. The corridor does change width a couple times throughout the length of the corridor. Predominantly, it's broken into that 64 and 38 foot wide sections with a couple of different cross sections thrown in throughout, including a 60-foot cross section to the very western end. So speaking of that 60-foot cross section, just a quick little cross section here to show you. Right now, that is 2 lanes in each direction, 2 very wide lanes, about 20 feet each in each direction. And so in order to accommodate buffered bike lanes here, no trade-off is needed. We just need to shrink those 2 lanes down, and that allows us to get 5-foot bike lanes with 3-foot buffers in fairly easily with no trade-off needed in that section. And now kind of moving on to the heart of it, the main 64-foot wide section. So this is what that section of the corridor looks like right now. Let me see if I can get my magnifying glass to work. So right now, that section of the corridor is 2 lanes in each direction. The interior lanes are 12 feet and the outer lanes are 11 feet. And then they also have 9-foot parking lanes on each side. And right now there are no bicycle facilities on the corridor. So this is kind of what that existing 64-foot section looks like. And then I would like to introduce the first concept. And this first concept would add buffered bike lanes by reducing a travel lane and retaining parking. So let me get my magnifying glass working again. So in this particular example, we lose one of those travel lanes and we keep 1 lane in each direction and we gain a 2-way center turn. The 2-way center turn lane can provide a lot of benefits to the corridor, including safety benefits. It can reduce the multiple point threat collision. So for example, if you were trying to turn into this driveway, right now, you just kind of have to stop in that travel lane and wait for a gap. But with the 2-way center turn lane, you can pull out of the through lane, and then you can easily wait for that gap in the opposite direction, and you're able to pull in. Similarly, if you're pulling out and you're trying to get to the other side, you only have to fight one direction of travel, and then you can wait for this other side to clear for you to join. This particular design would also, because it retains parking, we would include buffers around each driveway, as you can see here, to increase visibility, to make it easier for you to get in and out, and to make sure you can see people biking, going to and from. And these buffers would also provide a space for you to leave your trash cans and other waste receptacles outside of the bike lane and outside of the parking area, in a place that doesn't obscure visibility too much. This area, for where there are bus lanes, would also include conflict markings, so that everybody is clear, and that there is a mixing zone here for the bus pulling away from the curb. And so if you have feedback on concept one, we encourage you to fill out the survey, and there you can provide a rating on the concept, and you can also leave any narrative feedback. And we'd also welcome any feedback you have a little later on, through the open Q&A session. You can also leave your feedback in the Q&A box as I get through these as well. So now moving on to the second concept, concept two. This concept would also remove one travel lane, but we would reconfigure the bike lane and the parking to provide parking protected bike lanes. So in this example, we have that same travel lane trade-off, keeping one lane in each direction in the two-way center turn lane. But what's different here is we've swapped the parking and the bike lane, so that now the bike lane is along the curb and the parking is floating out between a 3-foot buffer between the bike lane and the parking. And so this provides a safer option for people bicycling away from traffic, physically separated from travel lanes. That provides a safer, more comfortable option that may encourage additional people to bike, and will make who are biking now likely feel much more comfortable and safer doing so. Similarly to the other option, we will have buffers around the driveways to keep visibility, which can also serve the trash can purpose and all those other great benefits. And similarly with the bus stop, we would have similar conflict markings where the bus pulls from the curb, but again, the bike lane would be against the curb in this particular example. And so this is concept two, parking protected bike lanes. And then our third concept for the 64-foot section would remove parking on one side of the street, but retain all 4 travel lanes. So in this example, we keep all 4 travel lanes as currently exist. The widths do change a little bit, but we are able to get buffered bike lanes on both sides with a 2-foot buffer. So this buffer is a little bit narrower than the other buffer you see in the first 2 concepts, that's 3 feet. And then parking is retained on one side of the street. Which side of the street that's on has not been determined, and that will be determined in a later stage. That is not in a later design stage, not part of this particular study, but parking would be retained only on one side of the street in this particular example, but all 4 travel lanes would also be retained for buffered bike lanes. And so those are the 3 main concepts for the 64-foot wide section of Benton. And again, we encourage you to share any feedback you have with the online survey or a little later on during the Q&A session. The other item we wanted to talk about when it comes to Benton is we wanted to pay particular attention to the area in front of the high school. And we've heard a lot of attention from students in the school community that we know a lot of students bike to and from the high school, and we want to make sure that they're comfortable and safe doing so. So we have an additional concept that we want to propose directly in front of the high school that would include protected bike lanes. You can see the little curb stop here, and the actual what that physical device is not determined as a part of the study, and that'll come a little later on in a design phase if this is the chosen option. But we do want to add the specific protection in front of the high school on the school side to give those students that extra protection and safety as they travel to and from campus. So now we want to talk a little bit about the 38 feet wide section, or the more eastern segment, where things narrow down a little bit. So here's what that segment looks like now between Marianne and Lincoln. Magnifying glass back. So this is 38 feet wide, 2 lanes in each direction, 2 11-foot lanes in each direction with 8 feet of parking on both sides. And right now with no bicycle facilities existing right now. So concept 1 would retain both travel lanes and would retain all the parking, but would turn the street into a bicycle boulevard. And so what a bicycle boulevard is, it's a street that prioritizes bicycle travel by including traffic calming measures to slow down vehicles. And there's a whole suite of tools that the city can use to implement traffic calming that can include things like speed bumps or chicanes or traffic circles or all kinds of things that can be used individually or in combination, and is very context dependent on what the exact behaviors you're trying to calm. But the goal is to make bicycle travel on this lower volume, slower speed street comfortable without that dedicated space. And so what those exact traffic calming devices are, if this is the chosen option, will be determined in a slightly later phase, design phase, when the city starts to dig a little deeper into what the exact needs are. The second concept would add buffered bike lanes, but would remove parking on both sides. So in this example, both 11-foot travel lanes are retained, but parking is removed on both sides. And instead, you get a 5-foot bike lane with a 3-foot buffer on both sides. This provides a dedicated space for people biking with a nice buffer away from moving traffic that is 3 feet wide. And then our third option for this corridor would retain parking on one side of the street and would provide standard 5 feet bike lanes. So in this case, we still have both travel lanes, 10 feet, and then on one side, parking would be retained. And similar to the 64-foot section, which side of the street that parking would be retained on is not being determined as a part of the study, and that would be determined a little bit later on. But parking on one side would be retained. Alternatively, this design could allow for parking to be alternated on either side, which could allow for a bit of a chicane concept to kind of wiggle your way through the street, which is another way to slow traffic down because you're not going in a straight line. So almost instinctively when you're driving, you're going to slow down to try to take those curves at a more comfortable speed. So retain parking on one side and then 5 feet bike lanes, but there's no buffer on either side of the bike lane. You just have the 5 feet there. And again, similar, we welcome any and all feedback that you have through the online survey. I see lots of things popping up in the Q&A box, so looking forward to going over those later, so feel free to keep leaving your feedback that way. And speaking of that, that's the last concept, so it's time for the Q&A session now. Go ahead and activate the raised hand feature if you would, Kaz, please. So right now, you should see the raised hand feature show up on your Zoom bar. So if you would like to raise your hand and ask a question or share some feedback aloud, please go ahead and raise your hand and we can call on you. You can also continue to leave comments in the Q&A box and we can go ahead and read those comments aloud that way as well. So let me see, participant window. But I can go ahead and start to read through some of the items in the Q&A box. Let's see, the first one I see here is, what measures will be implemented to decrease speed on Benton Street as cars approach San Tomas Expressway? That is a great question, and the expressway questions are a little bit of a tricky situation because those are county owned and the city is actively coordinating with the county to see what we can do with those intersections to try to make those approaches calmer as well. But that's a coordination effort that the city is currently working on. Anything else you want to add there, Nicole?
Sure. I just want to add that, well, if you're traveling eastbound on Benton Street, approaching St. Thomas Expressway, the lane narrowing options really help reducing vehicle speed, as a lot of studies show. So if we were moving forward for that option, so that could help significantly decrease vehicle speed. And if you're approaching westbound, going to St. Thomas Expressway, again, that will be, you are traveling on the 38-foot section. I would say, as Ben has go over in his presentation, there are many different traffic calming measures that could help decreasing vehicle speed. And that's something that we could look into, in the next more detailed design phase as we're working on. So again, that will depend on what option that we're moving forward on each side of the St. Thomas Expressway. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, we can move on to the next one.
Looks like we have another one from Lenore. Will any physical barriers or even rubber bumps be installed in the buffer zone between cars and bike lanes to discourage drifting into the lane? If you're referring to in the parking protected bikeway example, yes, that buffer area between the cars and the bike lane would have some sort of barrier device to stop the cars from intruding too much. What that device is, again, will be determined in that later design phase, but yes, there would be something there. We have another comment here. The drawings by the high school looks like it has physical bumps protecting bicyclists. Great. I hope they will have an easier time accessing the actual school bike parking. Yes. So the segment in front of the high school would have that dedicated barrier device between them. And yeah, how the students get from there to the school, that's definitely something that the city can kind of work with the school district on to see how we can kind of improve that direct connection onto campus where the bike facilities are. And okay, looks like we have another comment here. Concept one would work well with the roundabout idea. This works great all along PCH in North San Diego County. I believe that would be about the narrow segment with the bicycle boulevard. And yes, you like neighborhood traffic circles and those kinds of things are another good potential traffic calming option that the city could consider if the bicycle boulevard is moved forward. Love the chicane concept as well. Yep, exactly. Thank you for that. And then have a question in from Mike. How would you have guest deliveries or trash pickups if you remove street parking? So that's part of the trade-off that this study would have to look at. And part of what we'll do in this next community engagement phase is we'll take a lot of that existing conditions data and then we'll model that onto these concepts. So for like concept three, for if we look at, concept I don't know, 2 or 3 in the narrow section where parking is removed, we could then look at the utilization and be like, okay, if we remove half the parking, this would take the utilization from, I'm throwing out a number here for sake of the example, but it'd take the utilization from 30% to 60%, whatever the number might be. Is that an acceptable trade-off? That's what we would get community feedback on and city feedback on and all of that then. So all of that is fair game for the next engagement section when we have all that data and we've tabulated it for the parking, for the travel time, and for the intersections as well. So all that's coming. Anything you want to add on to that, Nicole?
No, I think you cover all. Yeah.
All right. That's all from the Q&A box. Any other questions that y'all have, feel free to raise your hand or leave any more questions in the Q&A box. We'll give y'all a few more minutes if you have any other thoughts or questions that you want to share. While we wait for a few more questions to come in, I can go ahead and talk about some next steps. So in terms of next steps, kind of as I alluded to, there's a few more things we have for this kind of phase 2 of community engagement. As has been mentioned, we have a concept survey online that we would love for you to take if you haven't already and share with all your friends and neighbors. And then we also have some engagement that we're coordinating with Santa Clara High to get some direct engagement with the school faculty, students, and staff. So we're working on a couple of events with them that we'll hopefully do in the next month or so. And so once again, here's kind of the quick overview of the project schedule. We're kind of right smack dab in the middle. We'll come back with that data analysis with each of the different concepts in the next few months. So stay tuned for these kind of phase 3 of community workshops. And we'll be back to the city's BPAC in January, presenting the reports as well. And so once again, other ways for you to stay involved. Stay tuned to the project website, santaclaraca.gov/bikeped projects. As always, you can send us an email with more feedback at bentonstudy@altago.com. You can leave us a voicemail at 408-381-4240. And you're always welcome to attend future community engagement events like this future round of workshops as well. And so unless anyone else has any more questions or comments that they'd like to share, we'd like to thank you for your time this very lovely Saturday morning. Normally I'd say go out and get out there, but be careful with that smoke and that air quality. But I do hope you have a lovely Saturday and enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll hang around for a few more minutes if y'all have any other thoughts or questions you would like to share. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Okay, I think we just got one more comment from Lenore. Thank you. This is very helpful. Well, we appreciate your time, Lenore, for giving us a lot of the comments and feedback today. As the city's project manager, I do keep track of those, and then we'll summarize and compile them together, and then also present them with our bicycle pedestrian advisory committee for our next steps. So thank you. And Mike has another comment. I hope they do early morning research as the traffic is backed up 30 cars long from Santa Moss to Los Padres. Thank you for that comment, Mike. We did collect traffic data in both the morning and afternoon peaks. So we'll be sharing that traffic impact results in the next steps. So stay tuned, please subscribe to our project webpage and we'll let you know more in the next round of community engagement. Okay. Ben, I think we don't get any more comments or questions.
Yeah, I don't see anything else. So thank y'all so much for your time this morning. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. See you
Thank
next
you
time.
all.